Today I'm joined by Rose Elliot, and Rose has just written a book, Every Breath You Take, How to Breathe Your Way to a Mindful Life, which is why we're having a chat today. So hello, Rose.
Hello, Gerard.
Hi. Funnily enough, when I got sent your book, I realised that I already had one or two of your books, vegetarian cooking books. So
they were in the kitchen.
yeah.
Okay.
So, I only just kind of
nice.
put that together, really. Can we start off by perhaps getting a bit of your background, a bit of your life story, like how you grew up?
Yes, absolutely.
And how it,
well, the reason why you had my cookery books, as well as this new book of mine, a more meditative one, was because I actually started my life in a retreat centre called the White Eagle Lodge, which you might have heard of, which my grandmother started. And I began my work cooking for the guests who came to the retreat centre to learn how to meditate.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Oh, okay.
Did you not? And the food went down really well. We're talking now the 1960s, and very few people were vegetarian then. It hadn't really got hold of people at all, and so. But everything in the retreat centre was vegetarian. I have been vegetarian since I was 3. We gave up fish, but before that, I've never had meat. So because of the ethics of vegetarianism, people who came to the retreat centre had to be vegetarian, and not many people knew how to cook vegetarian food, so I found myself in the kitchen cooking for these people, and the food went down really well, and they wanted recipes, and so in the end I put them into a book called Simply Delicious, which was my very first recipe book, and that took off, so I really had a cookery writing career, as well as what I was doing in the retreat centre.
Could you tell us a bit about the White Eagle Lodge for people who wouldn't know of it?
Yes, it was started by my grandmother in 1936. She was a medium. She had a spirit guide called White Eagle, who was a very, very wise guide, and he brought through a philosophy, really, quite similar in many ways to the Buddhist philosophy, but teaching people about the spiritual aspect of themselves and how to meditate. Although the meditation that they did was rather different from what I do now. It was very visual meditation, and just learning how to live in a way that's harmonious. Talking about karma and reincarnation. Just a whole different way of being for many people, which became very popular. And they got a lot of people, and they wanted to come down to learn more about meditation. And they came to the centre in the country, and that's where they stayed for a few days, and where they ate vegetarian food.
And you grew up in this environment?
I was born there, and I grew up there, and I was born with a destiny in a way, in that they saw me following on and being one of the main teachers or leaders of the organisation. What in actual fact happened was that it came to a point when I was around 30, when having been brought up completely in this beautiful place with the teaching, I just felt I had to get away to find out what I really thought and believed myself, without any parental influence or anything else. So my husband and I, who was also working there with me, it was a really painful time actually. We just knew we had to move away and find out for ourselves, what our path was. So we did, and I stopped cooking there, obviously. And at that point, I hadn't got any, you can call it religion, or any beliefs at all. I was really confused because I didn't know, as I said, what really resonated for me. It was just what I'd been brought up with. So I started, in a way, at rock bottom. And then bit by bit, I read Louise Hay, who was incredibly helpful. I did some transpersonal psychology courses. My husband and I both did all these things. And bit by bit, I pieced the bits back. And then my husband got very interested in Buddhism and used to go to the monastery called Chithurst, which is not very far from where we live. and he meditated there, met the monks. And we had some retreats in our home when the monks would come for a whole day and talk about meditation, mindfulness, and so on. And local people were invited. And I did them, really, because I wanted to make other people happy. My husband, and they meant a lot to him, and the people got a lot out of it. But because of what I'd been through with my background, I just didn't know still. I wasn't ready to commit. I thought it was beautiful, it was peaceful. I loved everything about it, but I just didn't know whether, I was a Buddhist. Then we had one monk who came, and this was what I wrote about in my book before Every Breath, my book called I Met a Monk. And he had a hugely transformative effect on my life. It was like one of those instant things, And he said in our retreat that day, he said, everything you need to know about Buddhism can be written on the back of a postcard.
Yeah, that's a fantastic quote, isn't it?
It's wonderful. It's just wonderful. It went right to my heart, right to my mind. And from that point on, I wanted to learn more about Buddhism. And the essence of Buddhism is just so simple and so practical and amazing. It is, of course, the Four Noble Truths, which is what I actually taught. I then go on in my book, I Met a Monk, to explain all about that in the way that the monk did as a retreat. But so I did that, and that changed my life. I don't call myself a Buddhist because I don't believe in labeling oneself. I'm a human being. I'm not a human being having a spiritual experience. I'm a spiritual being having a human experience.
Yeah.
And that's really important to me, just to think of it in that way.
So
that's... Sorry, yes, you asked me something now. I've been talking and talking.
No, well, that's why we're here. What age were you when you left the lodge in the first place?
I began to be a bit restless and unhappy about certain things to do with the organisation when I was about 27, 28. But because I was so deeply embedded and so many people relied on me and my husband for all that we were doing, and because of my parents, it took me till I was 33 to manage to move away.
Right. So up till then, were you like kind of full-time at this place? Like, was that
Absolutely.
Your job as well, yeah?
Absolutely. I lived, breathed and ate it, everything. It was just my life. And it was hard to leave because I felt I was letting everybody down, and I didn't want to disillusion other people who still were completely comfortable with everything, because I was in a position of some respect and authority. I knew that, I could affect other people's opinions, and I just didn't want to do anything that was negative. But I had to get away, and my husband shared it. We were absolutely together in it. So we went through that really difficult time. We had no money because we'd given it all to the organisation. But it was just, we were really, really helped by the Spirit and by angels. I felt, we just were helped in amazing ways to move.
So what happened when you left then? You found somewhere to live?
My husband went back to the work that he used to do before he gave it all up for the White Eagle Lodge. He went back to chartered electrical engineering. He'd left it some years ago to work full-time in the lodge, so he went back to a very junior position, lost all his pension rights and all the rest of the things one used to have. And so we started from rock bottom, really. I did get some money. The lodge were very kind to me in the end, and they gave me some money in lieu of royalties for the books that I'd written, because they'd been very successful. My cookbook, so I had a little bit towards it, and we just went. We found a modest house, and we settled down. The most amazing thing, a personal thing, that happened was that when all this was going on, I suddenly found myself pregnant with another baby, and my daughters were 12 and 14 then, and there was this big gap, and I thought, oh goodness me, on top of everything else, now I'm pregnant.
Yeah, sure.
But in actual fact, Gerard, it was one of the greatest blessings of my life, and very symbolic of, starting a new life, and it gave me a chance to be at home, have a baby, and It was a great blessing on my life, but it was an extraordinary thing to happen at that time.
I can imagine with the cookery books, I guess you must have been quite pioneering in that respect.
I was, yes. Simply Delicious, my first book, I think was only the second one out on the general national market. I think one had come out about 6 months before, and then Simply Delicious came out. And I was very lucky with the publicity. It was reviewed with rave reviews on Woman's Hour, and there were a couple of other newspapers and magazines that also reviewed it, and so it got immediate publicity. And in those days, of course, bookshops were the places you used to go to buy books, surprisingly enough. And we had bookshops ringing up all over the country wanting copies of this book because of the media publicity it had had. So it was really an instant bestseller.
Wow.
It was extremely exciting. I must admit that was one of the most exciting moments of my life when Simply Delicious came out.
I bet, yeah. I bet it was quite gratifying as well that, that there was this acceptance of vegetarianism, essentially.
It was, absolutely. I was determined to help people to love vegetarian food, because the people who came to the retreat centre where I was cooking, none of them were vegetarians. So I had to make things that would appeal to them. They had nut roasts and all the usual vegetarian things, but I made them really tasty. It was like old-fashioned vegetarian cookery in a way. I mean, we do more sophisticated things these days a lot of the time, but they absolutely loved the food, and it was because of that and the fact that they wanted my recipes that I wrote Simply Delicious based on all those recipes. And that was followed, because Simply Delicious was so popular, and I went on cooking after that had come out. I then wrote another one called Not Just a Load of Old Lentils. You may have heard of that one.
Yes, yeah.
Everyone seems to remember that title.
Well, it's a good title, yeah.
Yes, it was. A friend got that title. A friend did the sketches for the cover, and she was in the cookery shop sketching equipment, and the man said, "What on earth, vegetarian cookery?" Because she said it was for a vegetarian cookbook. And she came out with the immortal phrase, "Well, it's not just a load of old lentils, you know." And she told me this story, and I thought, what a great title, so we kept it.
Absolutely. And you've written loads, haven't you? So have you been a professional writer then since then? Is that...
Well, I have, really, because when we left the White Eagle Lodge, I was no longer employed, and my husband, as I said, was in a job in a lab. And I was at home with the baby, my new baby, but I had the contacts then from the cooking. I'd done articles for Part Works on vegetarian food and so on. So, I just had it. I was just ready to go, really, with my career. I wrote lots of books. I've written around 70 altogether.
That's a lot of books. Yeah.
It's a lot. I can't believe it myself, really.
Yeah. I was quite interested when I realised the connection that you were the same person who'd written all the vegetarian books. I wondered if it would be appropriate to talk to you about mindfulness in relation to vegetarianism, not really knowing what your take would be on that at all. But I'm guessing from what you're saying about the way you grew up that the kind of the compassion element would connect the two. Would you say that?
Absolutely, you're completely right. My parents were wanting to become fully vegetarian when I was born. They'd given up red meat, so I've never eaten it in my life. They were still occasionally having fish, but most of our food was, well, old-fashioned vegetarian food, really. You couldn't get many of the things you can get these days, but, there were stews and nut roasts and things like that, nut rissoles, vegetarian sausages, one or two of the early tinned vegetarian foods. And then, but occasionally, partly because my mother thought it was healthy, we'd have fish. And one night, when I was about 5, my mother was preparing fish, gutting them, taking whatever you do with fish. And I saw these fish, and I was appalled as a little girl that there were fish that had been killed, and we were going to eat them. I can remember the shock that just hit me. And I said, I'm not going to eat that fish if it's been killed for me. And from that moment on, I didn't eat fish anymore. And in fact, because I made such a fuss whenever my mother prepared fish, which wasn't often, but I did when she, on the odd occasion when she did have fish, they became fully vegetarian too. And for me, as you'll probably gather, it's completely about, I just don't feel it's right to kill an animal, or let alone, treat an animal cruelly. I just feel at one with them. What right have we got to hurt an animal, or anyone, in fact, or kill it?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And
I know I'm preaching to the converted.
Yeah, I'm aware there's a danger of kind of sinking into self-righteousness here, but I'm very bewildered by the idea that anyone could preach compassion and eat meat. Truthfully, I find that very confusing.
I agree with you. It is confusing. I just don't see how anyone, whatever their background, really could, if they just thought about it for an instant, could do anything that harmed an animal in any way. Why should? What right have we got to treat animals like that? I don't know. I don't judge people. Like you, I think bewildered is a good word, actually.
Yeah, I think it is important not to fall into judgment, of course, isn't it, in that kind of respect. So, going back to when you were kind of finding yourself away from the lodge and trying to work out, what your path was, so to speak, I suppose. Did you sort of experiment quite a lot, or did you just sit back and wait for something to turn up? We did do some classes, actually, some workshops. It started off, actually, at the time when I was leaving the lodge, Dr. Clive family. We went to transpersonal psychology, which was a brilliant little organisation. It doesn't exist anymore, but it was a Jungian psychologist called Barbara Summers and a man called Ian Gordon Brown, who'd had a lot of experience of spiritual and psychic groups. And together they started this organisation and did workshops based on dreams and creative visualization and, really tuning into oneself and learning more about oneself. And they did a series of 3, which my husband and I both did together. And that was so helpful because seeing things, seeing what was going on in one's mind through particularly the creative visualization was incredibly helpful because you were standing outside yourself and seeing these things, almost as if it's like a film. And that helped very much to put things in perspective and understand why we'd gone through what we had, and also the part we played, because we all have to be responsible, for what happens to us, in my opinion. So we did that. And then after that, we did something else called self-transformation. It's changed its name now, but that again was rather similar. It was work on oneself, a lot of meditation, being in a group participation, and so on. And that again was wonderfully helpful. That doesn't really exist in that form anymore. I think that they are doing it, but not under the same name. So we did work on ourselves, and then after that, when my husband found the monastery and Buddhism, that was his path, and we meditated together. But I didn't say I was anything because I still don't say I am anything. I just don't like labeling myself. But certainly now I feel the Buddhist teaching, the simple, basic Buddhist teaching, like I've described in both my books, has so much to help one in one's life. It's quite interesting for me to read your book in that respect, because it does come from a Buddhist perspective, doesn't it? Where I've come to mindfulness from a very secular perspective.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think there's a great deal of difference between the two perspectives?
I think that mindfulness is a wonderful thing to experience, however you get there, really. For me, I found it difficult to do mindfulness, or do it, you don't do it really, to be mindful. To start with, I just couldn't kind of get into it. It was when I linked it to breathing. I don't know whether from a secular point of view you use the breathing.
Oh, very much so, yeah.
Oh, well, that's fine then.
Yeah.
I think we're on the same page, actually, to be honest.
Probably, yeah.
Good. But not a lot of people do, in fact, realise the importance of the breath, as far as I can make out. But anyway, what I have found is that when you do the breathing, it takes you to a part inside yourself, which is clear and pure and wise, and you can, in a way, sort of it can take you anywhere if you're a sort of person who wants to go into. For me, it's pure spirit. Let's just put it that way. So for me, mindfulness has a spiritual dimension, because when I really get into the breath and I go through the different breathing exercises, which in fact the Buddha gave, I just get to this place of peace, clarity, wisdom, and strength, which to me is spirit or nirvana or whatever you like to call it.
So what do you do? What does your practice involve?
My practice basically involves breathing. It involves noticing the breath going in, my nostrils, going down, feeling it, just being aware of exactly what I'm feeling, not thinking what I'm feeling, being aware of it, and then up and out again through my nose, and just doing that. Really, that is all it is. Sitting quiet. Well, you don't have to be quiet. I mean, sitting, basically, and accepting whatever is going on around, being of this moment.
And do you have a specific
time
meditation time, or?
I do it all the time, but I'm not exaggerating grossly. I do it whenever I think of it throughout the day. When I was first learning it, I tried to do it at least 3 times a day, just a few breaths. I mean, it's surprising when you get used to it how far you can go, actually, with 3 breaths, the impact that can make. And then I started doing it on the hour. I'd read somewhere that if you spend 10 minutes of mindfulness breathing a day, it can change your life in 8 or 10 weeks. And I thought, okay. So I started doing it, but I did it on the hour. Every hour, I set my phone, my watch, so it would go off. And I'd do mindfulness breaths for 1 minute right throughout the day. That was what I was doing at one point.
So you do them wherever you were?
Sorry?
You do them even when you were shopping or whatever?
Well, if I heard my watch, you can tune out to it. That's the only trouble. When you get used to the alarm, you can tune it. Yes, because you see, when I do mindfulness, it's part of life. You don't actually have to sit, stand, or close your eyes or anything. You can just basically do it. It's in you. What I love about it, it's one's own personal link to the power of the universe, really. And I don't say that in a powerful way, but to the strength that you can get from I call it spirit, but for want of a better word. But it's immediately refreshing. If I'm worried or upset, I just take a mindfulness breath, and 2 or 3, just wherever I am, eyes open, eyes closed. It doesn't matter once you get used to doing it. And it calms me. It's amazing.
Yeah. So you're very much kind of incorporating it into everyday life.
Very much so. Very much so. Well, I do meditate sometimes. I go through phases in my life. Sometimes I'm in a very meditative mode, and I sometimes have meditated 3 times a day, for 20 minutes. But most days I don't do that at this moment. But I love to do meditation, even 5 minutes before I get out of bed in the morning, mindfulness breathing.
Yeah.
For me, meditation is mindfulness breathing, but just you breathe, and then you breathe, and then you breathe. You just keep doing it. And at night, I absolutely love doing the same before I go to sleep at night. But I'm not one of these people who makes a big fuss about meditation. I just feel meditation is something I do as much as I can, and I get so much benefit from it.
How long have you been doing this?
The mindfulness, not long actually. It was about when the monk came who had a big impact on me. I think it was only 2012. It all happened really quickly.
Right.
He, the one who said about he would write everything you need to know about Buddhism on the back of a postcard.
Yes.
And I was obviously ready to go because I immediately started researching, reading, so on, and then the idea for my book, I Met a Monk, came to me, and I wrote that, and it was lovely. It was the most magical experience writing that book because I'd come down to my word processor every morning really early. It was almost 4 o'clock in the morning. And I'd just sit there and write. And it was like I saw the whole thing in front of me. I know now what novelists mean when they say, it's like a film. I watched it and I heard it. I'm not saying I channeled it, but it was so vivid and alive, and that really got me into it much more. And the book came out, and I went on doing it, meditation and things, and then I was struggling a little bit with pure mindfulness because I didn't realise that it was so much connected with the breath, and then I suddenly started breathing and being mindful and not worrying about anything else to do, not thinking it really, and then that absolutely helped me. And then I thought, I wonder why more people don't have this approach to mindfulness, and I started researching online, and I was led to the Anapanasati Sutta, which is the night when the Buddha first talked about mindfulness.
Right.
It's the night, in my opinion, when mindfulness came to the world. The night of the full moon, which is why I've got the full moon on my book, and my book is based on those simple words that the Buddha gave that night when he was explaining about mindfulness, and it was all based on the breath.
And yeah, that's really interesting. Tell me about this monk guy then. What happened there?
He came from Chithurst Monastery. He asked us to call him the Venerable Bhante, which actually isn't his name, but that's the name he likes to be known by. Chithurst Monastery is a Theravada Buddhist monastery. It's near Petersfield. It's a bit of a way from here, but my husband used to go there sometimes twice a week at one point and meditate with the monks. Anyone can go. I mean, It's an open community, and he found it really helpful. And he met other people there, obviously, other Buddhists, and because we have a quite spacious house with a garden, he decided that he asked one of the monks if they would come and give a retreat day for local Buddhists, and not just Buddhists, but people who are interested in mindfulness and meditation and so on. And the monk did. And people brought food. It was one of those potluck things, and we had a day. And it went so well that my husband invited him the next year and so on. It went on for I think we did about 10 or 12 years of it altogether. Every year, people, as I said, they brought their own food, and we just rearranged our house, and the monks came, and then people gave donations to the monastery as a thank you. And it was a lovely series of, just a lovely thing to do, really.
What are Buddhist monks like? I mean, do they wear robes and all that sort of thing?
They wear robes. They wear those dark saffron-coloured robes.
I know, yeah.
And they shave their heads. The Theravada ones are just, honestly, they're so lovely. They're so, they just radiate peace. But they're so simple and human too, When you get to know them, you realise I wouldn't say I know them, but when you have anything to do with them, you just realise how kind of down-to-earth they are. And if you read my book, I Met a Monk, you'd get a taste of that because of the things the monk said and little jokes he made. I heard the words in my head when I was writing it, so they're not verbatim, but it's absolutely inspired on and based on the monks. Over the years, we had quite a lot of different ones who come to do our retreats, so we got to know quite a lot of them. And they're wonderful. I have the greatest admiration for them.
We seem to have talked about everything except your new book, actually, in a lot of ways.
I have sort of dropped it occasionally in the conversation.
Yeah. So what was the inspiration behind the new book, behind Every Breath You Take?
It was learning a bit more about mindfulness myself, particularly mindfulness on the breath. And I thought, to me it was quite a new concept, absolutely basing it on the breath. And it really helped me. So I just started literally researching on the internet to see the background for it, really. And that led me to this talk that the Buddha gave in the rainy season, at the end of the rainy season, 2,500 years ago, when he explained how to breathe and be mindful. He gives 16 simple ways of breathing, which my book is based on. And I was just so thrilled that there could be so much linked to the breath, and yet it could be all so simple. And it really transformed my practice and helped my meditation as well. And so I just thought, not many people seem to know about this, and I just thought, I wonder whether I could write a simple book based on it. And, well, you have before you, or maybe with you or somewhere anyway, the book that was the result of that. I've got it in front of me as I'm talking.
So have I, yeah.
It's, good, snap.
One of the things that strikes me about it is it's very beautiful. It's very, very put together with a lot of care and very, very lovely in the presentation on the pages.
Thank you.
So on. And I was really shocked that it was £8 because, given all the care, I would have thought that would have cost quite a lot to produce. So,
well, I don't know. I suppose my publisher knows what I'm doing. Only joking. I know. Do you know the thing? Another thing about it, Gerard, was I actually saw in my mind's eye the book. It was just. It was so much like this when I didn't see exactly the colours. I didn't see the red print saying every breath you take, but I saw a book with a tree and a full moon and a dark night sky and this sort of size. I just saw it.
Yeah.
So, you know, and so I was working towards that, and I just wanted to write something which was easy to read and you could just dip in, and, you know, I wanted it to be something anyone, hopefully, could benefit from.
And was it easy to write?
Yes, it was tough for me because I was writing at a really difficult time in my life. I don't know whether you want to touch on that at all, but...
well, your choice, your call.
Well, my husband, who was quite a lot older than me, got rapid onset dementia. He was actually... He was still with me when I was writing I Met a Monk. I was getting up in the morning and writing that one, and before that one came out, he had to go first into hospital and then into a high dependency nursing home because of the rapidity of his illness and the fact that I couldn't look after him at home because of his song and the care he needed.
Yeah.
So all the time I was writing Every Breath You Take, I was getting up early, writing, and then going off and spending a day with him, or as much of the day as I could at either the hospital or the nursing home. And obviously it's very sad seeing my husband just dying, really, getting more and more closed off from life. And I've actually described it a little bit at the end of the book, just, you know, so readers will know what I was going through. But also, very important, how much the breathing helped me. I don't know how I would have got through all that time in the way I did without the breathing. Actually, I was getting the care staff and people at the nursing home doing the breathing as well. It was helping them too.
Yes.
That is sort of part of it in a way, that I was able to put it into practice, and it helped me so much at the time that I was going through those difficult times, and I was writing the book at the same time, and I've actually dedicated it to my husband, because if it hadn't been for him, I would not have ever known about it.
Yeah. I think that's one of the real sort of fantastic things about mindfulness is it's not just some sort of theory. You know, it is something you can incorporate. And it's quite fascinating that you were saying essentially you were incorporating the practice whilst you were writing the book, and that was it's a very kind of integral way of doing things, I suppose. But it must have been very, very tough at the same time. I've written books and it's difficult, isn't it, for me? You know, and that's without all that kind of trouble, you know.
Well, it's amazing how it really was amazing to me how much the mindfulness and the breath and what you get to when you breathe, that centre of peace that you and strength and wisdom that you get to, it's amazing. You have to, and it's there for everybody. Everyone can find their own way to it, and what is right for them, which I also love, is completely individual, and yet it's universal.
Was it challenging at all going through such a traumatic time? Was it a challenge to keep it up?
Do you mean the mindfulness?
I do, yeah.
In fact, no, not really. I mean, I often didn't do dedicated times, which is the way I do mindfulness really, is as part of my life, pretty much all the time. I am probably exaggerating a bit, but I mean, I'm doing it now, really. Once you get into the breathing and connect with your own place of peace inside, which is what I call my Mindfulness Centre, where the mindfulness breath takes you, you truly can do it pretty much all the time. Yes,
yeah. That's Yeah, that's fantastic. I think that would possibly be a good place, a good note on which to finish up. I think, unless you have anything else you want to say, Rose.
I think I agree with you, Gerard. Can I say what a pleasure it's been talking to you?
It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you as well. It's been fantastic. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, it's been my pleasure. Thank you for asking me.